the IELTS test, you hear some recordings and you have to answer questions on them. You have time to read the instructions and questions and check your work. All recordings are played only once. The test is in 4 parts. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a man and a woman as they discuss a holiday. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, as the recording is not played twice. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. My name is Keith Waters. I'm interested in finding out about certain type of holiday. Would you be able to help me with that?
Welcome to Sunshine Tours Agency. My name's Penny. Yes, I'm sure I can help you with that. What exactly are you thinking about?
My wife and I are interested in a cruise of the Mediterranean.
That's a nice idea. A cruise on a ship in the Mediterranean is very popular right now. Can I take some basic details from you first so I can work out what kind of cruise might suit you?
Of course.
So your name is Keith Waters, and your wife's?
Her name is Melissa Waters.
Would you spell Melissa for me?
It's Melissa.
And it's just you and your wife?
That's right. We don't have any children.
Okay, let me make a note of that. Fine. Now, how old are you both?
I'm 32 and my wife's 30.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask about your interests and hobbies. This will help in choosing the right cruise for you.
We're both keen on traveling, of course. That's why we'd like to go on a cruise. We're also quite sporty. We both swim and jog quite a lot. We're interested in cinema and history. Melissa is also a keen fiction reader, but I prefer nonfiction.
What kind of budget were you thinking about?
We can spend between $7,000 and $11,000 on the trip. As cheap as possible, of course, is best.
Right. I've got all that down. Now, I need to know when you'd like to go on your cruise and for how long.
Our holiday window starts on the 1st of July and ends on the 16th of July.
Okay.
And as for length, we'd like to have at least 14 nights on the ship.
Thank you. I'm sure that'll be possible.
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Right. I've got all that down and I've got some ideas for you.
I'll just make some notes while I listen, if that's all right.
Of course. So, we have 2 boats that fit the dates you want. They sail on different dates, so that gives you some flexibility. First of all, I'd like to suggest the cruise on the boat the Maria Cristina. It's a Spanish boat, and you'd fly to Barcelona to join her. The cruise from there costs $10,500 for both of you, although the flights to get to Barcelona will be extra. With that, you have all food and drinks free during the voyage. You get an inside cabin, which means that you don't get a sea view, but you can upgrade to a sea view for a further $800. They have a cinema on board with different films every night, and there are also lectures on the places where you will be visiting. There are also classes that you can do, for example, painting, cooking, art appreciation, and others.
That's just in our budget, but an upgrade would put us over.
Yes, you'd have to do without the upgrade. Travel insurance is incorporated within the price, though.
What about the next one?
That's the Sea Queen. This is also a Spanish boat, but it sails from Marseille in France and follows the same route as the Maria Cristina. Barcelona is the last stop before arriving back in Marseille. This costs $9,000 for both of you, but this includes the return flights to Marseille. With this package, you do get a sea view, and food is inclusive throughout the voyage. All drinks excluding water are extra though. There are fewer things going on. There is a cinema, but there are no lectures or classes. There is a swimming pool and gym though, so you'll be able to keep up with your exercise.
That's quite a lot of information, so I'd better get back and speak to my wife. She can come back here with me in 2 days, so I'll expect we'll have chosen which boat to go on by then. We can talk further details when we come in then.
That's great. See you in 2 days.
Yes, see you soon.
That is the end of part 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Part 2. Part 2. You will hear a man and a woman on a radio program as the man gives an information talk on a reading charity. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully to the information talk and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Radio Star, your local radio station. Today we are joined by Jake Matthews, who is part of the Read for All charity. He is coming today to tell us a little bit about it. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks, Marianne.
So, tell us all about Read for All, Jake.
Well, as the name implies, we are a charity that is focused on ensuring that all children have access to appropriate reading books. It has long been acknowledged that reading is an essential part of education while growing up, and children who read a lot do better at school than their peers who do not read a lot. Our plan starts when children are very young, so of course we therefore need to aim at parents, and chiefly low-income parents, to educate them about the benefits to their children if they are read to. Many children who read a lot develop this love of reading when their parents read to them. If we can get this happening, then more children will grow up with an attachment to reading that will affect them positively for the rest of their lives.
How do you educate the parents?
Our key focus is at hospitals where children are born. We have plenty of leaflets about us, and we have volunteers who visit the areas where parents are in hospitals and distribute these leaflets. Other places where we distribute our leaflets are nurseries, kindergartens and primary schools when parents drop off or pick up their children. The parents can then read about the benefits of reading in our leaflets and also see how we can help.
How can you help?
Good question. We realise that one of the things that stops parents reading to their children is that they do not know which books to read or where to find them. Families on budgets also find it difficult to allocate money to this area of family life when things are so tight. Getting parents to think about these things is also hard if the parents are not readers themselves. If we can get parents to come to our centre or website, we can tell them how to find books at no cost through joining libraries, or they can take away free books that we manage to print at a very low cost. All our books are graded by age, and there are no issues with breaking copyright, as we have permission to use all of them. Also, we have a low-cost app that people can download to their smartphone, as it seems even low-budget families can afford to own smartphones. It only costs $1, and with the app, stories and books can be downloaded for free, and the stories can either be read by the parent or read by a recorded voice. Of course, we try and encourage the parents to do the reading because of all the added benefits that this brings. This has already been a huge success, and we believe that there are now thousands more parents reading to their children than when we started. This will make such a difference to the children's imagination and English skills. Linked to this, immigrant families can read or listen to the stories, and both the parents' and children's English can be improved.
You now have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the information talk and answer questions 16 to 20.
How do you fund all these activities?
We only manage to operate because of generous donations. We get no official help. We have one particular donor who supplies the funding for at least 60% of our needs, but the rest all comes from the public. We have various ways that we try to raise funds. We run car boot sales, special dinners, and other similar activities. We also ask people who use our products a lot to make a modest and optional donation if they can afford it.
Do you get enough money each year then?
Not always. Sometimes we make a little more than we need and sometimes a little less, but at present it all evens out in the end. We'd do better with more money though.
I'm sure many of our listeners would be keen to help out. How can they find out how to get money to you?
Thanks very much for the suggestion. We have a website called readforall.com. There is an icon on the home page labelled Donations. If any of your listeners click on that, they will see the process of how to make a donation. This will probably be more convenient than sending money by mail or trying to find one of our centres. Thanks very much to anyone who does this.
I'm sure you'll get a good response.
I'd like to tell you now a little about volunteering, as we've received some questions about that.
Of course.
We cannot afford to pay a salary to anyone who comes to do any work for us, although sometimes we can pay for some modest expenditure incurred for travel from where people live to our centres if we can get receipts. This will all be explained in our volunteer leaflets that can be picked up at our centres or found on the website, but I just wanted to make this clear up front. Now I'd like to let people know about where to come if they'd like to volunteer. The best place is to come to our town centre offices. To get there, you need to travel to the city centre and go down Ballard Street, which comes off the roundabout in the town centre. Go down Ballard Street and take the second right. You'll recognise the turning as there's a cinema on the corner. Across Ballard Street from it there is a police station, so you go down the road on this turning for around 100 metres. On the left are our offices above a car dealership. It's pretty easy to find us. If you come by car, you can park on the street, and there are, of course, lots of buses that go to the town centre. If you can't find us, give us a call or ask for directions to the main town post office, which is right opposite our offices.
That is the end of part 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 engineering students discussing a presentation they are preparing about a battery-powered motorbike. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Sarah. Shall we make a start on that presentation about our battery-powered motorbike project?
Yes, let's. It'd be nice to do a good job for the University Open Day. I hope the lecturer's right that it'll interest people thinking about coming here to study.
Well, they certainly should. and at least it won't be assessed.
Yes, and I guess we should be proud our project was chosen rather than anything done by others in our class. And our project's unusual because people usually think of environmentally friendly vehicles as being relatively slow. But our battery-powered motorbike can get up to 165 kilometers an hour, the same as lots of petrol-driven bikes.
And it has an efficiency of 90%, whereas ordinary bikes are far less. They waste a huge amount of energy.
And our bike doesn't need a petrol tank or an exhaust system either. So, markedly, the design is more straightforward, and it's also lighter.
Anyway, it's going to be quite a challenge to prepare something interesting and appropriate for all the people who might come.
Well, time is certainly going to be an issue.
You mean in terms of how much we have to deal with in only 15 minutes?
Well, I was thinking more about the fact that the talk's next week, and we have a lot of other stuff on just now.
Absolutely. So, how shall we organize things? We could just do a short talk and allow most of the time for questions.
Well, it'd be good to allow plenty of time for those, but I think we need to present quite a lot too. We could start by showing a couple of minutes from the film of the race it took part in.
Brilliant! I'm sure they'd love that. Then we can talk about how we built and tested the motorbike and so on. For example, one of us could talk through the project from the initial brief to prototype stage, and then the other take it on to testing and development.
Well, let's deal with that later. It might be better to have just you or me doing the talking, but we don't need to decide just yet.
Okay, so what about the slides for our presentation? Shall we work on the text for those now? Well, we could just use keywords. That'll help structure our talk.
How about using mainly visuals? I took lots of photos as we went along, so it'd be easy to illustrate the progress of the project that way. More interesting than diagrams, and slides with lots of text can be boring.
Okay, right you are. So, do you think we should discuss things with the lecturer before going much further? We could do that this afternoon.
Wouldn't it be better to get a first draft done? Then we've got something more concrete to discuss with him.
Sure, but I'd quite like a bit more input before we spend a lot of time preparing something that might not be what's needed.
Okay. When did we have a work with Amish in the 4th year? His tutor had him doing something similar last summer, so I'm sure he'd give us some useful pointers.
Great. Let's do that after lunch.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Let's think a bit more about how the project went. That might give us some ideas.
Okay.
Well, first, I'd say that writing the report was hard.
Yes, I was dreading having to write 80 pages in just a month, but actually it was harder making sure we didn't go over length. Anyway, I never imagined we'd deal with it with a day to spare.
No, it was lucky your sister had time to proofread it. She picked up on several careless mistakes, especially in the bibliography.
Yes, well, she works in publishing, so she's used to checking things. I suppose it helped that we kept detailed notebooks throughout the year. That was a chore, but worth it.
Yes, I didn't enjoy keeping mine up to date. I actually found it really time-consuming, noting down all the adaptations we made to the design as we went along. I hadn't anticipated that.
Me too. And I thought the tutor could have given us a bit more advice at the beginning of the process.
That's right. I liked doing the concept sketches. For me, that was one of the best bits. I've always enjoyed those initial stages of the design process.
I was relieved that the tutor picked up on that mistake we made in our aerodynamic sketches. It would have been disastrous if that hadn't been picked up at an early stage.
Exactly.
Finding sponsors took quite some time, of course.
Yes, but we knew that'd be an issue, and I never expected it to be enjoyable. Not like the actual hands-on project work. The tutor certainly came into his own at that stage.
Yes, I never expected him to have such useful contacts in industry. Good thing for us he did, though.
Right.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check
Section
your
4.
answers.
You will hear part of a talk about research into learner persistence given by a university lecturer to her colleagues. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 7 and 8. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
My talk is about a research study I did over a period of 5 years on learner persistence, why some people stick at academic study better than others. As teachers, you will know that there is a tremendous variation in the learner's response to certain things. For example, a short period of illness might completely destabilize some students and cause them to give up their degree studies. Other learners might overcome tremendous difficulties to stay the course. I am particularly interested in this second group, who are the ones with learner persistence. What I decided to do was design a research study using a sample of my university's third-year undergraduate students, 295 in all, who obviously had already stayed the course pretty well. The sample was drawn from a range of ages, but there was deliberately a significant number of mature students, and all respondents were living at home in the local region. I wanted to have this element of consistency, not having some coming from outside the area and living in university accommodation. It should be noted, though, that there was significant variation in home background to reflect the variation in our student population. I designed questionnaires which were devised to elicit what their concerns had been as they started the course, and what had sustained them throughout the 3 years. Findings from the first section indicated that their worries when they started varied from financial concerns, though this had not been as strong as I expected, to career prospects. But mature students with children tended to emphasize uncertainties about their relationship with them. The second section of my questionnaire looked at learner persistence under 3 main headings: social and environmental factors, other factors, and intrinsic or personal characteristics. I identified 3 levels of importance for each of these. At the first level, those points identified by participants as most important in learner persistence. For social factors, many respondents said how crucial it had been to have good support. Though there was no one specific source, it could be family or friends. As regards other factors, students are heartened not so much by high grades, but by what they regard as success in study. And for personal characteristics, many respondents reported that they took pleasure in challenge, and that this was regarded as very significant. At the second level of importance, in the first category, a sizable percentage talked about the fact that they had enjoyed themselves in school as an important social factor. In the second column, Other Factors, a number of people said that what was of most importance was decent health. This had a fairly strong influence on their persistence in their studies. And then, under the heading of personal characteristics, there were quite a large percentage of respondents who mentioned they felt it was important to have lots of interests in their everyday lives. This gave them a depth and sense of perspective, which less persistent learners might lack. And then, on to the third level. Under social factors, several respondents talked about good relationships with their tutors. For other factors, they mentioned lack or absence of any problems in their families. And finally, under column 3, they identified an ability to juggle several roles, what we might call their capacity for multitasking. Now, these findings obviously helped inform the design of activities, as I mentioned. But in addition, a number of further recommendations emerged. Firstly, I propose that the department distributes questionnaires to first-year students to help get an idea of their maturity when starting the course. This is really our overriding concern. Secondly, I recommend we look into ways of offering induction courses for some selected students to allow them to take on the role of advisors. We think they are the best people to act in that role. This policy will make support much more accessible to our students. Thirdly, this help is often most needed in the evening and night when offices are closed, and so we should set up online services instead of the more traditional telephone services. Research has shown that these services are actually more accessible to the majority of students. And finally, it is often important to be proactive. If students are not meeting deadlines, then someone should contact them rather than wait for them to come to us. Now, are there any questions about the points?